And our second speaker is Roqué Marcelo, who is majoring in video and film production with a minor in entertainment technology. He's graduating in December of this year. One interesting fact that he listed about himself, he writes, "I am a singer, songwriter, and musician who can play the piano, cello, and ukulele." And we'll get to hear his piano playing perhaps in the excerpt that he shows us. His thesis is entitled "Embracing the Ephemeral: Cultural Preservation Among Filipino Immigrants," and his thesis director was Paul Chilson. So let's welcome Roqué.
First of all, thank you for having me. And this whole project has been really exciting and life-changing and affirming in many ways. Before I begin, I wanted to pose a question to all of you. Does anybody here know what the word ephemeral means? That's exactly what I expected. Would anybody care to share that definition that they know? You were the first to raise your hand. Go ahead. That is correct. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it means something that lasts for a very short time, basically. So as I talk this afternoon, I wanted to invite all of you to reflect on something in your own life. It could be anything, something that doesn't last for very long. And as Dean Phillips said, my thesis project is called Embracing the Ephemeral, and it's essentially a creative thesis that was a short film. And for lack of a better word to describe it, it is a documentary, more or less, but I tried to approach it in a way that felt right to me, that expressed emotions and ideas that really resonated within my own life and my family's, because I am a Filipino immigrant along with my family here in America. And so this shares a very specific part of that experience. So I just wanted to show the first section of that before I continue my talk. Sana pagpalain ka, sana pagpalain ka, sana pagpalain ka. My name is Roqué, and I am a Filipino immigrant. My family and I have traveled across thousands of miles and through many years to become the American family we are now. But I find myself longing for the past and clinging to the pieces of who we used to be. Here in America, we've changed for the best in so many ways, but I cannot help but feel that we lost too much. And I wonder, endlessly, how we can get some of it back.
The ginger, you don't have to cut in small pieces. Usually we cut it in strip.
Yeah.
But because some people, they don't like it, so we can...
So leave it a big chunk so you can take it out?
We have better chance here overseas than back home, because back home there's so many educated people and competition is really stiff. That's why we decided to leave Philippines. I want my children to have a better future, to get a better education. And as a family, I want to have a better chance. It will be soft, about 5 minutes. Okay, let's cover it. Well, I think as a part of our culture, we have to keep our uh, language alive. And besides, children, if they're bilingual, that's an asset for them when they go to school or find a job. They have another dialect, language that they can speak. And when your children can speak your language, you can speak with them, even if you're outside or with other people and something you don't want other people to hear about something, you can talk to them in your language, and that's fun.
Make a wish. Make a wish. Blow. Blow.
Victoria, blow! Nacho. Oh my gosh.
There's no fake ones.
Trick
Yay!
Yeah, I want them to keep in mind, or my children, my kids, to tell their children, my grandchildren, the importance of family. You know, the closeness. But I want them to keep that value, be family first, and those tradition that we used to have, which we lost, most of them. When they were growing up, they used to do that, but because they're the only one doing it, they skipped it. They quit doing it. Like blessing, those kind of things. I love doing that, you know, for my kids. But you cannot force them to do that with my grandchildren now, because their parents quit doing it. But there are some tradition and culture that I hope they can keep, and I hope my children still remember those and pass it to their children. That's my big wish, being a Filipino.
So yeah, my thesis project, the way I like to describe it, was based on a feeling. And to be totally honest, it was based on a sense of loss. It's just been this feeling I've had for a long time, particularly as I grow older and my family grows. My sisters have children of their own, and I see how they engage with the world, and it's completely different than how I grew up. And when my family left the Philippines, I was only 3 years old. And I was lucky because my mom loves to cook, so I grew up with all of the traditional dishes, pancit, adobo. You have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's delicious. Lumpia, anybody? And my mom was also a teacher of Filipino folk dances. So I was surrounded by so much of this rich culture of my motherland, my home country. Now things change when you're an immigrant and you come to the US. There are all the pressures to survive, to do what the Americans do, the white picket fence, to get a house and car, to the rat race of earning an income and keeping up with the Joneses. And I see my nieces and nephews, you know, for better or worse, they're always on their cell phones, they have their friends. They don't enjoy the food like I do. They have no idea what the language means. And that's just how it is. So from my experience, the part of what it means to be an immigrant is to surrender part of your identity and part of your past. Because sure, you're becoming somebody new, and there's so much that's great about being here in the United States, but I think about the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren, and you know, they're going to have parents who don't know how to cook a dish like adobo. And to me, growing up, I associate that dish with gatherings within my community and when my mom set that plate on the table, it was an act of love because it's so delicious. And I get emotional because I wish that, these future generations of Filipino immigrants, I wish that they could still continue that. But here in America, they'll eventually marry people from other countries, other immigrants. I mean, this is truly a melting pot in this country, and change is inevitable. So I'm getting used to the idea. I don't like it. And that's why I made this film, because it was a way for me to process these feelings I had. And the idea of it came actually in the summer of 2017, because I knew that I had to do a thesis, and to be honest, it felt like an obligation because I had no idea how to do one, and it was an expectation, and there was a lot of thought as to what in the world I was going to do. And so I thought, well, why don't I do something, focus my energy on something that I'm genuinely interested in, that challenges me, and that I know I'll be okay devoting countless of hours of time to. And I knew that it would be a film, and the idea came to me when my mom was having a conversation over dinner. And we were talking about how she used to teach Filipino dances, and she asked my niece, would you like to learn that? And she was like, no, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So then, if I was to sum up my experience of doing this thesis, particularly a creative one that's so personal for me, what made all the difference is giving myself the time for personal reflection. If somebody was to pass by, they'd think, oh wow, he's staring at a wall. He's looking out a window. Or he's just writing a bunch of notes on a paper. But it's giving myself the time to decide how I want to frame these ideas of mine and how I want to use my voice. And the biggest challenge I faced was not the fact that I work part-time, I'm a full-time student, I'm trying to get good grades, and all that stuff. Yes, we all deal with that. It sucks. But the biggest challenge for me was actually literally how I was going to include my own voice in that film. I thought, okay, I'm the filmmaker, you're already hearing my perspective. I have the power of editing. It's like, you see reality TV, all of that is artifice. You're seeing somebody's perspective, somebody's propaganda. I get that. So then that's enough. This is coming from me. My advisor challenged me to rethink that. Because if this feeling is coming genuinely from me, maybe my voice and my face should be seen. So, all right, how am I going to do that? So that first segment, you see me playing the piano, and you hear my voice narration. I figure I ought to be the gateway, since the seed started from inside me and from my own feelings. And that's, people ask me, so how do I go about doing this thesis project? Every relevant piece of advice applies. Yes, stay on top of it. Do a little bit every time. Persist. But for me, it was more about really finding your voice. Whether it's the research or whether it's something creative, like this is something I really want to say. Find the sources, find the person to talk to, and do it to the best of your ability. I come from a country where there are people who don't have that privilege. Lots of countries who don't have the privilege to speak their minds and use their voices, and through a medium that they enjoy. So, this thesis grew from an obligation to an opportunity that I'm so thankful for. It gave me the opportunity to really reflect on my culture, my place as an immigrant here in this country, and to give back to the Honors College because they've been so generous to me. It's been a terrific win-win. And just a few technical things for anybody here who's thinking of a creative thesis. There was a steep learning curve. I'd never filmed anything remotely close to a documentary. I've had conversations with people, but never an actual interview. There's an art to it. The way you engage somebody in a way that makes them feel okay to be vulnerable and to be relaxed and open. And for me, I was really worried that this was going to be contrived. And maybe it is. That's fine. But number one, I decided I wanted this to be really honest. But one important thing that I learned, especially through the medium of film, is that I could just videotape myself in front of the camera and say exactly what my ideas are, and that's it. The power of film is that it shows you how. It conveys through other people's words, other people's experiences, the how. It gives you every underlying component and idea that you don't just get from a simple sentence. And hopefully you can relate to it more. Or hopefully, at least it gives you something tiny to think about, even if you have no idea what they're talking about. So, our previous presenter said, what happens now? What happens in the future? I honestly don't know. With this film, we carry on with our project. Some of us will put it to bed and be happy that we did them. I might see if this can make it into some film festivals. But the bigger picture for me is, how do I resolve the feeling that this film conveys, this feeling of loss, that the identity of my family, future generations of my family will not be the same. It's going to become completely different and maybe someday unrecognizable, at least from the Filipino sense. And I actually found the answer through making this film. And that is, without giving anything away, the first segment of this film had my mom. That was Luwalhati. And she's shown cooking and working in her garden. And in some small way, one thing that you preserve, something that won't last for a very long time, is to nurture it little by little every day. And someday it'll be gone, but at least in the moment, you understand its value and the richness that it gives you, and it makes life all the better. So, before I get too emotional, does anybody have any questions? The one in the corner, and then, yes.
I was just curious, do you plan to go to the Philippines? To go back? Do you plan to?
Yes, actually I'm planning, after graduation, we're planning a trip with my mom. I've been to the Philippines about 3 times for special family occasions, but not, and only for 2 or 3 weeks, not long enough to really enjoy myself and feel like I was immersed in the whole culture. But I do understand the language. I don't speak it all that well, and I'm trying to learn all of the foods. So, but yeah, I'd like to visit the Philippines as much as possible. So, yes.
So, like in one of those scenes that had you with your mom cooking, like who did you have help you, and how did you get all that video?
Great question. I had plans to enlist help from other people in my department to help film this. At the end of the day, I did it all myself. I set up the camera, I hit record, I worked on the audio, I did all the editing, all the production, all of the logistics, the scheduling, the traveling, getting food. I wound up doing it all. But one thing that definitely helped, and that I would encourage all of you to do, particularly if you have a lot of time leading into when your thesis is due, is to apply for your Eureka grant. I was very lucky. It was a miracle. I got one, and the funds from that helped offset the cost of having to get a camera, gas, sound equipment, all that stuff. So yeah, but I did it on my own. But I started filming last summer in June, but leading up to that, I did all my research, getting all of my equipment, and so this has been a really long process getting to this point. And then I spent a lot of this semester finishing up all the editing, getting the written part of the thesis, the paper, done, and then just getting ready to present it. Yeah. Question? Yes.
So like you, I'm also a Filipino immigrant.
Yeah.
But I want to know, like, how did being an immigrant help shape the person that you are now? Like, how are you able to stay true with your Filipino identity in a foreign country?
Well, I find that invariably I am in a minority in any setting I walk into. I might have quite a few things in common with many people, but it's more often than not, I'm one of the few people of color in the room, or other than that, I'm the only one who's an actual immigrant. So it's something I'm always aware of. It doesn't bother me. I'm used to it, and I think if anything, I try to let that inform how I see the world, and that I've had the benefit of seeing what the world is like outside of America, and I remember that. And I value all of the privileges and freedoms we have here, and I don't try not to take them for granted. So that's a big part of it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right there, and then we'll get you up there. Yes.
You mentioned that you had not done documentary work before.
Yes.
Having gone through this experience, is it something that you would like to revisit? And if so, why? If not, what kind of work do you want to do?
Well, excuse me, great question. Yes, I would love to continue this. I like the idea of creating something that reflects the reality of people's lives in the most honest possible way. I'm conflicted with the word documentary because I feel like I hope that I can have more creative license to what's done. So you see me playing the piano there. I'd like to make the type of documentary that's a little more expressive, that has more musicality to it, more color. Because there are plenty of documentaries that are very academic. It's a sit-down interview, it's a talking head, and they'll just blather on about a bunch of facts, and it's all very important, but it puts you to sleep. It does to me anyway. And I want to make the kinds of documentaries, for lack of a better word, that are engaging and that have some degree of, I don't know, I mean, that there was an artist playing with it too, that it wasn't all just information. So yeah, yes. So all of that. The question up here.
Somewhat similar to that, this was, just a beautiful vignette of your experience as an immigrant. And as you said, your feelings, your experience isn't necessarily what the rest of your family feels like. Would you be interested in pursuing more of this, trying to find other immigrants who share, a similar experience to you, or sharing the stories of people who feel differently from you about that? What would that look like for you?
Yes, in fact, I really want to eventually create a series of films similar to this that explore the immigrant experience from all kinds of angles, and not necessarily just Filipino too. Because there are people who are legally trying to become a permanent resident in this country and have to wait upwards of 20 years just for that to happen. There's this big controversy now about people illegally coming into the country. Yes, that's true, but the alternative is to pay ungodly sums of money and wait for years and years and years of your life just for that process to legally even happen. In the meantime, you have to feed your kids, or if you're a refugee, you have to escape famine, or you're worried for the safety of your family. So yes, I want to explore all of those things, and also multiple generations of immigrants. So in my film, there's my mom and I were born in the Philippines, and then there's two other interviewees who were born here in the U.S. And so, in this case, it's apparent to see how further apart people grow away from their culture of origin as each successive generation happens. So yeah, there's so many facets of this. There are immigrants who are LGBT. That's another can of worms. There are immigrants who wind up in prison, and then what? There are immigrants now who are being detained in prison facilities for no reason other than they're immigrants all over the country. It's actually quite an industry, by the way, this whole prison system and detaining immigrants. It's happening, it's real, and it's in a lot of places. And they, just a quick aside, they may have these huge facilities in rural areas that people don't know about, and hundreds of people, immigrants, are housed in there for months against their will. There's a lot to explore in this topic, and I'd like the opportunity to be able to do that down the road. Yeah. Sorry to be such a downer.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.